Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We've got quite the show for you guys today. It is episode number 200.
200.
We started this podcast back in 2018, and here we sit in 2022 in August, 200th episode. So we're going to do a bit of a retrospective today. We're going to talk about the Colts and the Pacers, very different teams from when we started 4 years ago. So are they any closer to a title? We're also going to talk about some memories as well. So just kind of an episode where we're going to take a look back. B. Scott, let's take a look back, though, at how your last couple of weeks were.
Busy. Fall sports are starting to kick off. Literally, this is week 0. We're coming up on week 0 of the college football season, and the FCS world gets busy this weekend. We have a couple big FCS, FBS matchups. The very first game of the season, I believe, belongs to, I'm probably getting this wrong, but I believe it's Austin Peay versus Western Kentucky. This weekend is the very first game of the 2022 college football season. I do know it's an FCS versus FBS matchup, so very excited about that.
Oh yeah, especially when it's a like group of 5 versus FCS. It's always it gets that much more interesting because you think like, it's one level up, so theoretically the group of 5 school should win, and the FCS team. I mean, look, I watched North Dakota State come into Schumann Stadium and beat Ball State, so I mean it can happen. Quite a bit. I mean, we've seen,
but North Dakota State really belongs in FBS. If you ask anybody,
yeah.
it's as their athletic director has said, we're always listening to hear what it would take to move up to the FBS level. So I'm sure they are now for sure listening. But I mean, the FCS is going to be starting losing to some teams here. They just lost James Madison up to the FBS level. Next year, you have Jacksonville State moving on up, and you've got Sam Houston moving on up. So that's some big talent right there. That's going to be headed into the FBS ranks, and North Dakota State still going to be ruling the FCS world most likely.
Oh yeah, so, for sure.
Preseason number 1. Anybody surprised?
No one is surprised about that.
No one.
Also had the high school football season kickoff, which that was big for us here at 3C Media.
Yes, it was.
You guys have been blowing up the TikToks, the YouTube videos. Again, thank you guys all for your support out there. But give a shout out to the 3C Media High School Players of the Week. Yes, we had Luke Hanson of Roncalli, 335 yards, which was a school record. And then he had 5 touchdowns on top of that, career high. So, which means the Roncalli record must be way above 5 then. And then you have Eli Hook out of New Palestine. He had 11 tackles, 2 pass deflections, and a fumble recovery in New Pal's win over Westfield to start the season.
Over my Rocks.
Yeah, a big win over a ranked team. I mean, that's what New Pal is 4A now.
New Pal's back.
Yeah,
New Pal's back.
So yeah, big win for them. So yeah, fantastic kickoff to the season. We had our 3C Media Game of the Week, which was Chittard and Brebeuf. Chittard absolutely showing that they are here to.
They're back.
I mean, they're always a team that's in it, but they're showing that last season they had a little bit of a lull. They're back this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great as well. Which stay tuned to. Well, actually, it's out by the time you watch this podcast. It's out today. Our game of the week for this week, which as of recording is undecided, but will be decided tomorrow. And be out by the time you watch. Let's go ahead and get into it. We've taken a look back at the start of the high school football season. Now let's take a look back at the last 4 years. When we first started this podcast, well, first of all, technically this podcast started at Ball State. That's where B. Scott and I...
as a radio show, as a legitimate radio show.
Yes. We started at WCRD at Ball State. We had the
Crash 91.3 WCRD.
We had the Crash Course podcast, and then... Once B. Scott and I both graduated, we weren't doing the podcast, and then back in 2018, I was like, hey, B. Scott, we've always talked about starting a podcast. Why don't we actually do it? We did that. We had humble beginnings where I literally would hook up my microphone to a laptop, and I would the microphone kind of dip down over my phone. I would call Brandon, and that's how we record it into Audacity. I would have I would lean over so we were picking up. It was picking up both of our voices. That microphone, and it was we put it out on SoundCloud, not anywhere else. And since then, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're out there on YouTube. Finally, TikTok. We've stepped up the promotional game for sure.
Oh yeah.
Humble beginnings, but we're starting to get it figured out. And so we thought it would be a good idea, like we said earlier, to talk some Colts and Pacers. Because back in 2018, the Colts were coming off a 4-12 season, the first Jacoby Brissett year, and the Pacers were at the time of the first podcast being released were 21-19 en route to a 48-win season and the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. They would go on to lose to LeBron and the Cavs in 7 games. So we're going to do a special version of Hot or Cold, which if you're new to the program, we say a take and say whether or not it is a hot take or a cold take. And so question number 1, the Colts are closer to a title than they were on episode 1. And I in thinking about this podcast, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to play the contrarian today. Because I don't know what you're going to say, B. Scott, but I imagine at least contrarian to what most people say. Because I would imagine people would say it's a hot take. I mean, there you have Matt Ryan. They've got their defense in order. They've got, Quentin Nelson's awesome. Jonathan Taylor's coming off a fantastic year. You would say, yeah, they're closer to that. But I'm going to say cold. It's a cold take for me. I get it. At the time, the Colts were coming off a 4-12 season. Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback, although I am a very big Jacoby Brissett apologist. I think he's been thrust into 2 pretty impossible situations. I mean, yeah, was he great? No. But I also think he's not as bad as maybe some people like to say he is because, I mean, look, getting traded to the team 6 days before the season and then being thrust in week 2, that was the year before the podcast, and, of course, the year that Andrew Luck retires 2 weeks before the season. He's never had a full offseason to adjust as the number 1 starter. But that is neither here nor there. It was the beginning of the Ballard era. It was pre-Q, pre-Shaq Leonard. It was the end of the Pagano era. Both the offense.
It was like a few months pre-Q because the Colts went on to draft.
Right. Because the literal our tester episode was should the Colts draft Saquon Barkley, because at the time, even though all the reports were like they're taking a guard, I was like, but I want Saquon Barkley. So we were like, we're gonna talk about that.
I think the Colts made the right decision.
Oh yeah, for sure. And both the offense and defense coming into 2018 were 30th in the league. The O-line had given up a league-high 56 sacks. So, yeah, I mean, at the time of the record...
You think we're further away now than then?
Well, but here's why. Number 1, Andrew Luck was still in the building, meaning you had a young franchise quarterback on your squad. The most important position in football was locked up seemingly for the next 8 to 10 years. Remember, we had one more luck-led season where the Colts made the divisional round, losing to the Chiefs, and things were seemingly back on track. That was 2018, the first year of the pod. Luck was 4th in QBR and 11th in quarterback rating in 2018. The Colts have been in quarterback purgatory since Luck retired ahead of the 2019 season, which leads me into bullet point number 2, and that is that the AFC is a much stronger place than it was back in 2018. Sure, you had Mahomes and Brady still at the top. Lamar Jackson was in his rookie season, so he hadn't had his glow up yet. Deshaun was on the Texans, and Phillip Rivers led the Chargers. And the Bills, Dolphins, Browns, Bengals, Broncos, and Raiders all finished with 7 wins or fewer, and I think you could feasibly think that all of those teams are going to be better than 7 wins this season.
Maybe not the Browns.
Yeah, potentially not the Browns. But, I mean, looking at the quarterbacks now, Mahomes has 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 ring. The Pats have Mac Jones, who's, shown, who's had, took strides in year number 1. Lamar Jackson has improved and has an MVP. The Chargers are in a better place with Justin Herbert. Josh Allen has put himself in the elite conversation as quarterback for the Bills. Deshaun Watson is now on the Browns, though, of course, like we said, he's out.
He's out for 11 games.
Exactly. Russell Wilson's on the Broncos. Devontae Adams is now the number 1 target for Derek Carr in Vegas. The Bengals have Burrow and are coming off a Super Bowl appearance. The Dolphins drafted Tua, added Tyreek Hill in the offseason. There are legitimately 13 of 16 AFC teams that you can make the case that they will be in the postseason this season. And, Tyreek Hill to Miami brings up number 3, which is the Colts have kind of dropped the ball when it comes to putting talent around their quarterbacks. I mean, yes, we did talk about in our draft episode that they did a good job drafting pieces like Alec Pierce, like Jelani Woods. That was really good for them. But at the same time, I mean, they've lacked kind of going out and supporting the guys that they've gone out and gotten. I mean, it always seems like the Colts could use one more piece. They could use one more receiver. And I mean, I guess you could theoretically say that about every team. Like, oh yeah, if we, you could say that about any team that's up and coming. Oh, if we added one more wide receiver or one more tight end, we'd be in good shape. But at the same time, the Colts just have always kind of seemed to be in that mode of like, oh man, look at that, Odell's free, or this player, or we should go out and get Julio Jones, or who we should go get this guy. And not to say that Julio would have been the answer, but I'm just saying.
I don't think it's because fans are like, oh, we need one more wide receiver. We need one more veteran wide receiver.
Yeah, and maybe that's where you kind of draw the line there. So
they're all young. They need a veteran presence. Even fans are now like, just bring back Ty. We just need somebody in there. I mean, right. Yeah, your wide receiver coach is as good as it gets as a veteran wide receiver in Reggie Wayne, but I think that's
does he want to suit back up? Can we get Reggie Wayne back?
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think so. He's looking a little old. Have you seen him?
I did not see
him. He's a little gray around the edges, man.
Really?
Yeah.
But to sum up, the Colts don't have a long-term quarterback. They could always use another solid weapon in the AFC that is deeper than it was in 2018, and so that's why I say it's a cold take. The AFC is a much scarier place. So, I mean, there's a chance, talking about being closer to a title, there's a chance that your path to the Super Bowl is going to go through, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and then whoever comes out of the NFC. So it's a much tougher road than it was 4 years ago.
See, I'm gonna disagree. I think it's a hot take. I think the Colts are definitely closer to a Super Bowl now than they were then. I mean, look at the numbers for their defense alone. Now they have one of the better defenses in the league. The offensive line is much improved. Yeah, it's not as good as it was a couple of years ago. It has taken a step back with the wishy-washiness at left tackle and in the right side of everything.
The bar was on the floor with 56 sacks. So,
right.
Yeah.
And yes, there is no long-term play for quarterback, but you have Matt Ryan for at least 2 years. Like Matt Ryan has said, he's more likely to play 5 or 6 years rather than retire after 1 or 2. So if you have that, and then you have one of the best, if not the best, running back in the entire league. Your defense is loaded with Pro Bowlers, former Defensive Player of the Year, and guys that are also overperforming compared to where they were projected to perform, a la Shaquille Leonard. And by the way, are we really is that his name now going forward?
I think it's one of those situations where like I think his name has always been Shaq Leonard. But he like had maybe got along the line got like called Darius, and then it's finally like, hey, just to let everybody know,
So like the football that I have that signed Darius Leonard, is that like worth a ton more money now because it's like,
I mean, worth looking into.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if it is, hey, let's go. But
I will say Shaq Leonard sounds a lot better than Darius Leonard. I like Shaq Leonard. Leonard, because of the like like the Q, it sounds like tougher, fiercer, in my opinion.
But is he going by Shaq Leonard or is it Shaquille?
Probably Shaquille. He's probably going by Shaquille, but I like Shaq Leonard. Hey, look, there was an article that referred to him as Shaq Leonard, so that means he didn't hate that, so I can go with it.
Well, it's kind of like when we were at Ball State.
Mike Whale Lewis.
How he changed up his pronunciation like every year. It's like it was something different.
Well, it was like, during the undefeated season, it was like McQuail Lewis, and then like he had that big run, and then he was like, actually it's my quail. It's not your quail, it's mine.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the Colts are definitely a lot closer now than they were then because they have the pieces in place now. Yeah, there's no like, are they contenders like for the foreseeable future? I don't know, because of the quarterback situation. That's tough to say. But as where they stand right now, I think they are closer to a Super Bowl now than they were then because they have more pieces in place. They have a coaching staff that is more solid. They have a GM that is more solid, even though he is a pain in the you-know-what occasionally with his outlook on free agency and all of that, and how he's a penny pincher big time. But look, yeah, you just named off all of those teams that have gotten better, but you didn't look at the teams that have gotten worse. The Houston Texans are no longer in that conversation. The Patriots really aren't there yet. And then all those teams, most of the teams you mentioned are in the AFC West. Guess what? Not all of them are going to make it to the postseason.
Right.
Because they're all going to cannibalize each other. And then you have the Colts, who are playing in probably one of the weakest divisions in the AFC right now. So it sets the Colts up, I think. But regardless, yeah, you're going to have to run through a gauntlet in the AFC. But guess what? You were going to have to run through a gauntlet then as well, because you had Tom Brady and Pat Mahomes. Either one of those you're going to have to go through probably both of those to get to the Super Bowl. Well, now you're going to have to go through Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. So it's really not a whole lot different now than it was then. I have more faith in a team beating Josh Allen than I did a team beating a Tom Brady led squad. So I feel like the landscape, yes, it is a deeper AFC now, but it's also shifted. The Patriots are not that dynasty that once was. I think, yes, those teams have gotten better, like I said, but at the same time, the gauntlet still remains very similar. In my opinion, it's actually a little bit less. And I'll go out and say it. I'll go out on a limb and say this. Just because the Broncos added Russell Wilson does not mean they are automatically now a Super Bowl favorite, like a lot of people are putting them at. Like I don't see it. You can't tell me they were just a quarterback away from hoisting the Lombardi Trophy.
And you said, go ahead. Sorry, you finish your thought.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm just
Oh, I was just gonna say that. Yes, you are right. Not all of those teams will make the playoffs. I mean, not kind of the Colts, because I do think the Colts make the playoffs. Not counting, the Colts. There's gonna be 6 other teams that make it, but the path to getting there, I mean, you're gonna have to face. I mean, if I don't know, like I don't know who's on the. I haven't taken a look at the schedule yet. We're gonna do the Colts, preview episode here in a couple episodes. I don't know right off the top of my head, like what division of the AFC the Colts play this year, or what side, what all the AFC opponents they'll have outside of the division. Well, last year it was the West, I think. No, maybe this year it's the West.
It's the North.
And so even if it is the North, well, let's say it's the North or because last year it was the East, because we played the Bills, Jets, and Patriots and Dolphins. Yeah. So, and 2 years ago, I know it might. I don't know. Anyway, what I'm saying is, like, you're gonna have to play, and if it is the North, I mean, heck, we had this argument back early on.
It's the West.
It's the West. So I mean, heck,
I'm pretty sure, because I'm seeing the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Raiders.
Yeah, so it's the West. So yeah, I mean,
and the Chargers.
Those are gonna be 4 really tough games, plus your divisional opponents who are going to play up, plus whatever team you have to play from the NFC. Plus, you play the NFC. You got the
NFC East.
You're right. You'll play. I mean, so that will be a little bit of a break. A little bit. You'll play.
That's a pretty.
You'll play the Giants.
Game.
You'll play the Commanders. You'll play.
Eagles.
But the Eagles are going to be better. The Cowboys are always a tough game for the Colts for some reason. And they're going to be a playoff team again potentially. So I mean, but I mean, I guess they don't really matter because we're talking about the AFC here. But like the schedule is definitely, besides your own divisional opponents who are going to play up.
Your record is your record.
Right, but at the same time, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, ask the Colts about, what the end of their schedule was last year. They should have been better, but the teams at the bottom, ended up getting them at the end. So it's going to be tough to get through the.
The nice thing is, when you're looking at the Colts with the AFC West, they play the Chiefs at home, Broncos on the road, Raiders on the road. So they split it 50-50, but your two toughest, the Chargers and the Chiefs, you get at Lucas Oil.
Which is nice, but the path the entire season and the playoffs is what makes it a little bit tougher. Because, I mean, if you're telling me, like, oh, hey, in 2018, we going into that season, I mean, heck, we even saw it. I mean, the Colts started 1-5 in 2018 and ended up rallying and finishing like 10-6 or whatever it was at the end of the year. So, I don't think they could do that in today's AFC. The AFC. I mean,
I don't think you could. No,
right?
But I don't expect the Colts. If the Colts jump out and fall off the wagon right out of the gate, they're not Super Bowl contenders regardless. I'm just saying right now, the team the Colts have is better set up to be a true legitimate contender this season because they have what it takes to stop some of these teams. They have an amazing run game that they can keep the opposing offense off the field. Guess what? We have found that the key to beating Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs is a good run game. We were actually able to beat them when we weren't very good because we just kept running the ball behind Marlon Mack. And it worked out well. And then same thing with the Bills. Look what the Colts did to Buffalo in Buffalo last season. I mean, Jonathan Taylor broke all the records that day. So, and the defense, for one, is it has the ability to stop these teams as well. So I feel like because of where the defensive unit and the run game is right now, the Colts are better set up to be able to make a run at the Super Bowl than they were then. They had no run game then. The wide receivers, okay. Offensive line play, horrible. Defense, not good. They are in a much better place now than they were 4 years ago.
And that's an excellent counterpoint too, because I'm over here talking about all the offenses. One way to keep them from actual ball is having Jonathan to have that kind of reinforcement. So let's go ahead and shift gears over to the Pacers now. Hot or cold, the Pacers are closer to the title than they were in episode 1, and I am actually again going contrarian. God. I'm saying hot. I wanted to play the contrarian this episode. I was like, well, look, B. Scott, we when I was making the graphic for our high school state finals picks, I thought I knew we had a lot of the same, but
I saw that. I was like, we really were chalk?
I didn't realize that we were both the same. I was like, I gotta go contrarian this episode. I gotta be.
Yeah, I could have swore we both picked differently.
Well, I mean, I know
at least once.
I know we had. Yeah, I was like, I know we both had Cathedral. I knew we both had. Yeah. But I didn't realize we both had South Adams. I knew we both had Andrean. I didn't realize we both had Moralsville. Well, I keep saying Mooresville. Merrillville. I knew we had but I thought like 3A and 1A were different, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was like, I gotta go contrarian this ep.
Yeah, and you're going way off the deep end on this.
But one. I'll have my reasons. We'll get to them. Hey, I mean, again, right. The very first the pilot episode of this podcast was me saying that the Colts should take Saquon Barkley over Quentin Nelson, and so we've been rooted in me having these crazy contrarian ideas from the.
Of course, I do wonder if the Colts had taken Saquon. Of course, there wouldn't be an offensive line for Saquon to run behind. It's very similar to the way it is now in New York.
Right, exactly.
So
you'd be seeing the same things. He'd be hurt all the time because no offensive. But yeah. So I'm gonna go with a hot take here. I mean, at the time of episode 1, the Pacers were in the midst of what you could argue was the best season in the last 4 years. Over the course of the 4 years, like coming into today. Yeah. They had a full season of Oladipo. They took LeBron to Game 7. It was the last time that the Pacers won a playoff game in a playoff series. Oladipo would then get hurt in 2019, traded during the 2020-21 season. Sabonis has since been traded as well. The Pacers haven't won a playoff game since and are coming off a 13th place finish in the East. And this may seem like reasons to say it's a cold take, but the team is finally in a rebuild, and the core looks to be solid. I mean, they have 6 players on their roster selected in the top 15 of their respective drafts, all under 30. The 2 most expendable of them were, at least by what we see articles about. We see Buddy Hield in trade rumors. We see Miles Turner in. Those are both the oldest. Buddy Hield is 29. Miles Turner is 26. And are also the most expensive. Turner is owed $17.5 million this season, but is in the last year of his contract, so we're either going to see him traded or they're probably not going to re-sign him. We'll see. He has 2 years left, $20 million this season and $18 million next season. Both have trade value, but you're okay keeping them in the right circumstances. You have 3 more talented young prospects in Chris Duarte, Tyrese Halliburton, and 2022 6th-round pick Benedict Mathurin. Rick Carlisle's at the helm, easily the best coach the Pacers have had in the last 4 years. You can say what you want about Nate McMillan, but he wasn't doing great. And then who was after Nate McMillan? Was there someone? We had Nate Bjorkgren.
Yeah.
Obviously, that wasn't great. You'd like to think that and now I think you like the Rick Carlisle hire even more, because when they first got Rick Carlisle, you're thinking, okay, they're looking to get a coach to kind of whip this team in shape and get back into good graces, get back into a not top team in the East playoff kind of circumstance. But now that he's still here and they're like going full rebuild, that makes you even like. He gives you even more optimism that like he's here to help this team grow, and you like the fact that like he's one of these coaches that has made it a long time. He's going to be able to get these guys where they need to go. So you'd like to think that he was aware from the 8 playoff teams in 2018. It was the Raptors, 76ers, Celtics, Cavs, Pacers, Heat, Bucks, and Wizards. In 2022, it's the Heat, Celtics, Bucks, 76ers, Raptors, Bulls, Bucks. So the powers that be in the East haven't really changed. Plus, there's no more LeBron. So the big boogeyman on your half of the conference is no longer there. So, after years of injuries and playoff disappointment, it really feels as if the Pacers have a direction in an Eastern Conference that isn't a ton tougher than it was when we began the show. I mean, especially in the sense that, like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like, the Pacers had Paul George. Then, of course, the Paul George trade happens, before we had the podcast. And so it kind of felt like the Pacers were still kind of like half in the door of a rebuild and half in the door of trying to relive those like early 2010s glory days of like, hey, if we get the right piece here, we get the right piece there, maybe we can contend. And it was just kind of patchwork, not wanting to let go of that championship potential, because they had teams that could have very easily gone to the finals had it not been for LeBron and the Heat at the time. So it kind of felt like they were kind of 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out of the door. And now that they've kind of gone full, all right, fine, we're going to just tear the whole thing down. And so I think that since they've kind of let go of hey, we may not be good for a year or two, but we're going to get back into it. I think that makes them gives them a better chance to on down the road be successful. Are they a finals team? No. Are they an Eastern Conference Finals team? No. Could they make the playoffs in decent capacity? I mean, we've seen. Even another point is the fact that we've seen homegrown talent start to be embraced more. I mean, I know this is a bad example because he's so darn good, but Giannis is homegrown. As far as like he's always been on the Bucks. You saw the Suns are mostly homegrown. I mean, yeah, they brought in Chris Paul, but they're mostly homegrown. You saw a lot of success with the Hawks homegrown. You see the Nuggets, even though they haven't really done much in the postseason, they're homegrown. So you've seen a lot more embracing of like, okay, we're not going to go out and get 3 superstars and call it a day. You're now seeing some teams be successful at just growing their own talent, drafting, and building around a core.
Yeah. So this is a cold take. I think the Pacers are closer to the number 1 overall pick right now than they are an NBA championship. I mean, I will agree. They do seem to have a plan. And it's a rebuild. They are going into a rebuild mode, even though the Simons say, oh, we'll never go into rebuild mode. It's just retool. Okay.
It's just a different word.
You are rebuilding And yeah, I mean, this is a good there's a lot of young pieces here, but I think you do need to see a little bit more out of them. I mean, look, the Pacers, I'm still not. The verdict's still out on Chris Duarte. You know, I mean, it was only a rookie year, and he had injuries. I'll give him that. But I feel like, I guess, unless we may be looking at this as it from two different points of view.
We are.
You're looking long term. I feel like I'm looking this upcoming season.
Right. And that's kind of because I mean, if you take those two different outlooks, that's kind of why I wanted to go contrarian, because if you kind of take a step back from the team itself, like, because you took in both arguments, you took the argument of the teams as they're constructed right now. Whereas I'm like, yes, I'm taking that into consideration, but also widening the scope and looking at what they're going to have to go up against en route to getting to that title, not just like, oh, well, the team itself is constructed better, which in both instances, yes, they are. No for the Pacers. Like, you're right in that aspect, like, as far as, like, hot for the Colts, cold for the Pacers, because as they're constructed, are they going to, a finals anytime soon? No, but, like, at the same time, widening the scope, no LeBron, homegrown talent being embraced a little bit more. Because I mean, look at the powers in the East. I mean, Giannis, except for the year that they went to the finals and won, I mean, he's had his share of early surprising exits in the playoffs. The 76ers can never seem to figure it out in the postseason. You've got the Nets, who are a mess. I mean, I know they just announced today that KD's coming back. You've got the Raptors, who are up and coming, sure, but nobody really scares you. But back when we first started, all it kind of seemed like, well, it doesn't really matter because LeBron's in the East, and we're not going to be.
But if we're looking at the future, LeBron's not the same LeBron either.
All right.
Like, a lot of people are saying, "Dang, I wish he was still in the East. Would love to get one more shot at him." I think, yeah, you want to take your shot now,
yeah,
like with old man LeBron. But so for me, as of today, the Pacers are definitely closer to the number one overall pick than they are an NBA championship. Down the road, I'm still not 100% sold, because I don't know. I need to see more out of these younger guys like Benedict Mathurin. Okay, yeah, he had a great summer league, but that was going up against guys of similar caliber. Like, how is he going to be when he has to go up against like James Harden or Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving or any of those guys? How is he going to perform then? It's one thing to go up against a guy that was drafted in the second round or has been bouncing around the summer league for the past 5 years, than going up against some of the best in the world. That's where I'm a little hesitant to say, oh yeah, the future is bright. Yeah, the future, I'll agree, the future is bright, but I'm not 100% sold saying that the Pacers are going to can get back to that level of early 2010s of when they were, it was like you could watch the playoffs and you're like, yeah, the Pacers are making to the Eastern Conference Finals, and depending on where the Miami Heat landed as their seed, because they weren't always like, the Pacers were the 1 seed at one year, and the Heat they're like, as long as we're healthy getting to the playoffs, we don't care what seed we are, as long as we make it. Right. So
I think that's what kind of hamstrung the Pacers though for a while, because it felt like for a long time they were, when they made the Paul, because originally when the Paul George trade happened, it was just like, okay, fine, we get Sabonis, who we didn't really know his caliber at the time, and Oladipo, who we thought, okay, they're just trying to put butts in the seats, get an IU guy. That's what it's supposed to be. And when he came out and was basically like basically made us forget about Paul George. I think the idea was, okay, we're gonna just pick up where we left off. In those seasons where they were making the playoffs, going to making it out of the first round, whatever. And when that didn't happen, I think it kind of, like I said, hamstrung them, because they had 1 foot in the door of a rebuild, 1 foot out of the door of the rebuild. Now that they've committed to the full rebuild, I think that gives them a better chance. Not necessarily this year, but just in terms of it. Now they kind of have a direction finally.
Yeah. I wish we could kind of go back into the direction of the early 2010s though, because they really did look at the homegrown talent. When you look at that, at one point, the starting lineup was majority guys they drafted: Danny Granger, Paul George, Roy Hibbert. Technically, George Hill wasn't drafted by the Pacers, but he was acquired in a trade on draft night. And the only player that they signed in free agency out that was a starter on that team was David West.
George Hill was
Lance Stevenson was homegrown talent.
George Hill was the Spurs trade, right? With for Kawhi.
Yeah. The big old what if.
The what if that never really was a what if.
Yeah. But that team was built correctly. You know, you brought in a player that was just starting to scratch the surface of how good he could be in George Hill. And I think George Hill reached his peak here in Indy. And then same thing with David West. David West was that last piece that they needed. Somebody really physical to play alongside Roy Hibbert. They did the right moves, but also really focused in on their own talent. And that I would like to see them get back to that. Maybe they are now. It kind of feels like they are with building up of the draft capital, the trades they've made. I still feel like there's going to be more trades that are going to have to happen because obviously, like Miles Turner has now said he's not going to resign here. So you're going to let him walk for nothing, or you're going to get a little something out of him. I don't know.
It feels like, and I mean that's like. I feel bad for Miles Turner because he's literally been in trade talks for like 3 years.
Oh, yeah, and that's why he's not going to resign. He's like, I'm done with this. I'm over it. So, but, yeah, the long-term outlook for the Pacers is brighter now than it was, a year ago, I would say. But it's still a cold take for me because from the point of view I'm taking, I'm looking at this season here because we are looking back on the season that they were in when we started the show back in 2018. So I'm looking because even then you looked at past that season, you go, okay, the Pacers are here. They just need to make a few little moves, a little adjustments here and there, and boom, they are right back there contending for the Eastern Conference. Pacers, I don't think are close to contending for the playoffs now going into this next year. Cold take for me.
I'm with you. I think you have the right answers as far as like, going into from that season to this season. Like I said, I'm just I wanted to go contrarian. I wanted to widen the scope a bit. So, but yeah, I think I'm interested to see where both of these teams can go here as the years go on. But before we have a little bit more to talk about tonight. Before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about our friends of the show. First of all, from Anchor, the Crash Course podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. The Crash Course podcast is also brought to you by Eat Lunch and Board Game. Heard weekly on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be heard. Board games build bridges. Also, we want to remind you guys that you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go follow us at 3C Media Sports. Go to the TikTok page. We're getting closer to 2,000 on TikTok, which is really crazy. Thank you guys all for your support there, as well as the YouTube channel, 3C Media. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. So before we get out of here on our 200th episode, we do kind of want to take a look at our favorite storylines from the past 200 episodes. It's been a lot to cover, been a lot to talk about over the last 4 years. And I'm trying my best not to apply recency bias to this because it is really easy to get locked in on that. Some of my favorite segments have come from our off the wall stuff, and we had the fast food NCAA tournament bracket. That was a lot of fun. There was an episode.
Thank you, COVID.
Exactly. Well, and I was gonna say that. Obviously COVID itself not great. Not sitting here saying those were good times at all, but the content.
Well, if it wasn't for COVID, we wouldn't have been doing that.
Well, right, but I'm saying what I was getting ready to say is that, like, I think some of our, like, it was very interesting to try to do the podcast and make content during COVID, which I think made an extra challenge, which was kind of fun. Obviously, the circumstances were not fun. That's what I was saying. Like, circumstances were not fun, but just from in a bubble, like, oh, hey, what are we gonna do this week? Oh, we're gonna do a NCAA tournament bracket from fast food, or oh, we're gonna do talk about if the titles of these shortened seasons are going to be a Mickey Mouse title if they win, stuff like that. When we talked about, of course that was iRacing too. iRacing was a kind of a fun, interesting, like, couple of weeks on the podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
Talking about the old days of the Village at BSU, we did something there. I liked our non-MLB All-Star baseball teams. That was pretty cool. We did a segment with Chris Simmons, who's filled in one time, where we remembered our favorite NFL, NBA, and MLB storylines. I think it was like towards the beginning of 2020. I think we did that because it was from like the past years. So we've had a lot of content like that. I do our draft and Indy 500 coverage have always done the best as far as like performing. I don't want to base everything that I go off of by what's just performed well, but the Indy 500 is when we kind of started to blow up here recently.
Thank you to our Scott Dixon fans.
Exactly. And then also, our draft coverage and stuff was another big boost. So, those have been kind of the best. But I will have to say that my favorite storyline came over the last two football seasons. I mean, in 2020, college football seasons. In 2020, you have, Notre Dame in the ACC, a home upset of Clemson, and making the playoff. You had IU, who had an insane season, that play against Penn State that probably shouldn't have been upheld. They had a crazy season. There was talk about, could they end up in the Big Ten title game?
They almost did, too.
They did. You had Ball State winning their first bowl game. That was really cool. Excuse me. And then in 2021, you had the spoiler makers, Purdue upsetting Iowa and Michigan State. You had Cincinnati becoming the first Group of 5 school in the playoff, and which, I mean, obviously I know isn't Indiana, but at the same time, that was really cool to see.
Close enough.
It was close enough to us that we had kind of a stake in it. And then of course, the NAIA schools, having great seasons. IWU was one of the ones that stood out to me, going 7-3 with a win over FCS Valpo early on. So that's been really fun. So the last two college football seasons have really had a lot of great storylines and have been a lot of fun to cover. And I think that's what stands out the most to me. With the honorable mention going to that what we mentioned earlier with the Colts when they started 1-5. I'm sure I can't remember exactly what our segments were back then because we weren't in the early days. We weren't the greatest at cataloging our episodes because on SoundCloud you had
this really may not be our 200. This may be more like our 250.
Okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna say because here's how we arrived at 200. This is in our lore. I'm trying to find the other word. It's not lore. In canon, this is canonically, and canonically, this is our 200th episode. It's just being wired in as that because when we started putting the episode and started with season and episode, and then just started going episode. We had 44 episodes during the COVID season, and so when I was going into the following year, we're just gonna go straight episode number. I was like, okay, so we did 44 in our first 3 years. So 44 times 3, that got us to 132. So then our preview of the Colts Bills game in the playoffs was episode 133. So I was like, okay, from there, and then that's where it stuck on there. Now, Adam Collins of Eat Lunch and Board Game, we sometimes will meet and talk our respective podcasts. And he showed me a website where going to the Apple, because I don't usually ever go to the Apple Podcast page or sign in to our account on Apple Podcasts because our RSS feed, for those technical terms, it just gets fed out to all those places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So I never look at those websites. But Apple Podcasts does keep track. And back in April when we did the draft, I think at that point it was 201. So technically, now granted, it also counts we made a little like short 1-minute blurb when we put out and said like, hey, we're moving to Anchor. So, or like, hey, we're doing this. And if you want, you could also not count the best of. I think we did count best of, but you could also not if you wanted to. And so that could move us back towards 200. So technically it is not our 200th, but canonically from here on and henceforth, it is our 200th episode.
Got it.
Yes.
All right.
So there's the backstory you didn't want, but I gave you anyway.
And you got it now. So you got a little bit of a history lesson tonight and a lesson in Ball State math.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, all those were a lot of fun. For me, the ones that I've always enjoyed the most are our draft, the NFL draft. And when it surrounds the NFL draft, that's where I geek out. I'm kind of a dork, and I will try my best to watch all 7 rounds of the NFL draft. It's not always doable just because life. The older I get, I have other responsibilities and I can't sit there and watch 7 rounds, but I love the NFL draft. I always have, dating all the way back to my time at WCRD, preparing for the draft shows. I love it. I mean, of course, I will always have the one hot take from a show that I was on with a friend of the show, Nathan Wilson. He called out saying that T.Y. Hilton, because he and I did a show together when the Colts drafted Andrew Luck number 1 overall and T.Y. Hilton later on. He said T.Y. was going to be really, really good. And he was super pumped about the T.Y. pick. I was very hesitant. I literally said T.Y. will be no more than a special teams player for this team.
Well, that's what he was drafted to do. He was drafted to be a punt returner.
Right.
So
I was like, why did we spend a draft pick on a punt returner? Well, here we are now. As I said earlier, fans are clamoring for the Colts to re-sign T.Y. because, you know, all these Pro Bowls later and one of the best wide receivers in Colts history. Yeah, I was wrong. And I still, he always brings that up, but I love the draft episodes regardless. I don't know, just something about those. I feel like that's my wheelhouse a little bit. Talking about college football, I love college football. Obviously, college football is where we got our start.
Yeah, it's where we met
together. Yeah, doing the pregame, halftime, and postgame shows for Ball State and Cardinal College game day. Obviously, all this conference expansion that just happened, we really got prepared for that during that time with CCG, with all the hypothetical what ifs, and now a lot of them are coming true. Who knew it was just going to be
10 years later,
12 years later. So anything with college football and NFL, the draft. One of my other ones that, you know, I don't think we've ever done a full segment on it, but we always talk about it and we always are like hoping for this, but all the talk we always have of the NCAA football game and how to bring it back. What's the best ways to bring it back? And it's coming back finally.
Yes.
So
on next-gen consoles, which makes me sad. I'm going to have to see if I can track down a PS5. But
I know, me too. But it's okay. It's time to upgrade anyways. Yeah. That's the sign of things to come. That means that all the new games are going to start getting phased out of the PS4 genre and just move right into PS5.
Oh, I mean,
that's just kind of what you have to do.
I look to my right where my PS4 resides. I mean, old girl and I have been through a lot. I was gifted a PS4 in 2015. End of 2015. So it's been around for 7 years, and if you could ever hear it during it,
PS4 really been out for that long?
2013 is when it came out.
Well, I guess the PS5's been out for 2 years now.
Yeah. It's just really hard to get one because they didn't make a ton of them, and then COVID kind of shut the supply chain down, so they're really hard to come by. Yeah. But
you don't know when you're looking for one. You don't know if it's actually one or if it's just like a skin for one or something.
Right.
You're like, why is this one only 450 when the rest of them are like 800?
Right.
What's wrong with it?
It sounds like when I turn there are times when my PlayStation 4 is on that it sounds like an airplane is about to take off. So it definitely is time for an upgrade, and I'm like, oh, come on, just hold out a little bit longer. We can try to figure out how to get a PS5. I just need you to stay with me. But yeah, I'm excited for it. It's on next gen consoles, bro.
You still got the old PS2 or PS3?
I have all three of them. I have the PS2, actually in my desk right here where to put it. And then I've got my PS3 just to the right of me on my TV stand. So I've got the whole gang here except for the PS1.
PS1 was where it was at, especially when they rebooted it and they came out with the PS1 like mini.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't as big of a console. That I had the little one. That's the one I had. I had that and I had the Sega Dreamcast.
Yeah, Dreamcast. The PS1 was the first gaming console I ever had, and it was given to me at Christmas by my parents, and the game they gave me was NASCAR 99. And it was awesome. Good I remember, choice. Yeah, exact. I was so excited because that was back when you had, I think, maybe the best game intro of all time. If you don't remember the intro to that game, the sound, the song they played was amazing. I don't want to get like DMCA'd off of YouTube for playing it, but if you haven't checked it out, go Google it. It was a very good intro.
Still the best NASCAR game. I don't remember what year it was.
The Drive to Daytona, or not Drive to Daytona, the whatever one with Ryan Newman, because we've talked about it before. Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. The one where you could start your own team and you had everything from modifieds all the way up to the cup cars, and you could hire drivers or you could drive in them. And then to get the game started, you were in a drag race through the city in a Dodge Viper racing Ryan Newman. Go from him being like the face of a video game to standing at a urinal next to him at IMS during the BC 39. Talk about times have changed.
Yeah. You should have been like, hey, do you remember
remember when you were like the face of a video game? No, it's okay. My brother-in-law didn't know who he was, and he goes, man, these USAC drivers come in all sizes and ages. That guy, I think he might be raised. And he was in a fire suit and kind of older and kind of a bigger guy. I hope he fits in one of the cars. I was like, yeah, that was Ryan Newman. Yeah,
incredible.
He's racing. So, but yeah, those were always some fun ones. I feel like we had a hand in getting the college football video game back.
I'd like to believe.
Yeah, of course. If we really did have a big hand in it, then they would have said, "Oh yeah, we'll put it out on PS4 as well." But obviously, they weren't listening that well.
No, not at all.
It's been exciting. Like just to look back, where the first one was actually recorded in the living room of my old house the night before the Super Bowl, and I believe that was the Patriots and Falcons.
That was our first Super Bowl that we covered, because we had our test episode. I think because January 8th, I think, was the first episode that we came out with. Like, we started during the NFL playoffs, so we cut because this last year we've kind of narrowed the scope more to just Indiana sports as opposed to trying to cover everything. So we were covering the entirety of the NFL playoffs. We were talking. That was the year that the Eagles beat the Patriots. You had Nick Foles going on his run. So that's where it all started, because I think it was shortly. I think our first episode was like shortly after Tua for Alabama throwing the game-winning touchdown against Georgia in the national championship game.
Oh yeah,
it was kind of funny that those two national championships like book in the 200 episodes. The same that's teams true. In the national championship game.
Just different outcomes.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff, a lot of different things, and I'm excited to see.
We've also seen the birth and the fall of the Hoosier High School Huddle.
Yes. Which, I mean, it was definitely a good. Well, we've actually seen the birth and death of two other podcasts on. I mean,
what was the other one?
The MCT podcast. Which, I mean, no disrespect to them. We're not harboring any ill will. Just something where it just kind of faded out, and we just tried something new, and it didn't quite work out. Same with the Hoosier High School Huddle. I was like. Not that I enjoyed doing it, but I was like, man, I didn't think
we've adopted the Hoosier High School huddle into this show.
Yeah, it's more of a hybrid now, because I was like, dude, even if we did like a 20-minute episode, that's still so much prep that we have to put in, because again, high school sports is so hard to prep for, so you might as well just like double any normal prep time that you have. So if you're prepping for an hour episode, it might take you 2 or 3 hours depending on what you're trying to look for. Yeah, maybe not necessarily double it, but it's gonna take a longer time to try to find high school stuff, especially when it's the preseason, like we were trying to do a couple of weeks ago, where we're like, man, Max Preps hasn't updated anything, John Harrell hasn't updated anything. I mean, you were able
Indy Star wants us to pay for everything,
so you're able to kind of piece things together. But yeah, it's definitely harder to go by. So yeah, we were like, you know what? Maybe we can just, now that we've narrowed the scope to more Indiana stuff, maybe we can just integrate high school sports coverage into our stuff. And I mean, it's worked out well so far. So I'm excited for that. So that was our 200th episode retrospective. Hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. We're excited for where the future of the podcast can go. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go to the YouTube channel, 3C Media. If you're watching it over there, hit subscribe, ring the bell. We're closing in on 100 subscribers. We're at 88 right now, so go hit that subscribe button. Go watch the videos. Go leave us a comment. Let us know. Sound off in the chat. Go over to TikTok as well. We're closing in on 2,000 followers over there. A lot, and there's going to be a little bit more high school football content over there, because we're going to post like our players of the week there in Twitter, so remember that. And also remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Well, next week, it's going to be time to preview the college football season. We'll dive into everything from Notre Dame, Purdue, IU. We're going to talk some small college football as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. But until then, have a good one, everybody.